We've got Thursday Night Football tonight between the Washington Commanders and the Chicago Bears, and I'm about to break down everything that you need to know from a DraftKings and FanDuel perspective for the showdown in single game contest. Because if we're being real, this is not the best football matchup we've ever seen in the entire world, but it's okay because all the games are watchable. And we've got the showdown contest to sweat out. So if you guys could do me a favor, like, subscribe, follow, all that good stuff really is appreciated. Helps me keep my content free. And then also, supports me as well. So once again, I really do appreciate if you guys could do that. It'll only take a half second of your time. And also, if you want to sign up for the football package we have at Stokastic.com, which includes all of the data that I'm about to be going over while I'm breaking down these slates, I've got a link included below. It includes everything in our football package. So our contest trend, our simulation tool, all included in one bundled package for football. But let's look at some of the results of my initial simulations for tonight's slate, starting with DraftKings, and then we'll also do it for FanDuel right afterwards. So I've already got my DraftKings lines built out and simulated here. I'll favorite the top 150. And we've got the contest on DraftKings today is a $1.5 million prize pool, $500,000 to first place. So that is why I have the simulation setting set on a 30% to first payout. And as far as my top overall projected lineup, there actually is one that projects quite a bit better in terms of sim ROI than every other lineup. It is Sam Howell at the captain spot with Brian Robinson, the Commanders defense, Curtis Samuel, Roschon Johnson, and Terry McLaurin. So we're looking at a Washington Commanders onslaught stack, and kind of interesting too that it ends up with a run back of Roschon Johnson as the lone Bears player. So kind of a scenario where the Commanders are winning the game in a blowout and Roschon Johnson's playing the garbage time snaps at running back. I do really like the upside of this lineup, and yeah, that is one that is not projected from any dupes here, and then is also by far highest. I think actually the highest gap I've seen between a number one and number two projected lineups as far as sim ROI goes in the times that I've been making these videos this year. If we're looking at the lineups that are expected to be duped the heaviest, then we see this pretty often with the DraftKings contest in the sim when they pay out really top heavy. Most of the lineups that are expected to be heavily duped are not my highest ROI lineups. Also, a slate where we don't have like an insane amount of chalk. So it's not like, at least on DraftKings, I have lineups that are duped 40 or 50 times or anything like that. But some of the lineups here that are expected to be duped the heaviest, the number one most duped lineup here, Terry McLaurin at the captain spot with Antonio Gibson, Brian Robinson, Joey Sly, Khalil Herbert, and Sam Howell. So actually kind of similar to the other lineup that I had built, but it has Khalil Herbert in it as opposed to Roschon Johnson, and still it is an onslaught stack of the Commanders. Also doesn't really leave any salary on the table. So as far as other dupes go, you'll see there's a handful of lineups here duped, and yeah, you have to scroll really far down here to find one of these lineups landing in my top 150, which really goes to show how valuable it's going to be unique on DraftKings for this slate. Always the case with Showdown, but especially for this one, where we don't have very many major edges in terms of individual player projections. Yeah, avoid those duped lineups if possible. Exposures. Who am I getting the most of on DK? The quarterbacks. No real shocking surprise there. Justin Fields did look way better last week than he's looked in other games this year. So we've seen Justin Fields a little bit hesitant in the first couple of games to run the football. We've seen him use his feet a little bit more the last couple of games. That's obviously going to be better for his upside. And then also seemed to open up the passing lanes for him. Justin Fields coming off his best game of the season. We know last year was one of the best fantasy quarterbacks in football, especially in the second half of the season. I like Justin Fields to get it going from a fantasy perspective going forward. So getting to both him and Sam Howell a good amount. Howell also played a really good game last week and in a tough matchup against the Philadelphia Eagles. Game went to overtime. Commanders nearly ended up winning. So hopefully they could build on that. We'll actually get a somewhat exciting game to watch. Although still looks like we're getting to some defense exposure, more so on the Commander side. Actually have 40% Commanders defense exposure in the set of lineups. And then 20% of the Bears defense. So quite a bit less, but Commanders defense is showing up in a good amount of lineups here. As far as skill position players we're getting to, Curtis Samuel, overweight to him, about even with the fielder on Brian Robinson. He's expected to be popular, but it seems to be more or less warranted here in our data. Commanders defense coming in pretty well overweight to field on them, as well as with the Curtis Samuel play there. Other contrarian-ish options we're getting to. One that stands out a whole lot, who is also my number one overall projected lineup. If you guys remember, Roschon Johnson. Of course you guys remember. It was what 2 minutes ago that I brought it up. Either way, Roschon Johnson, getting to him in 31% of lineups. He's only projected for 14% ownership. So this looks like a good contrarian play in Roschon Johnson. And it's also funny because people are not on Johnson now, but I remember just a couple of weeks ago when we saw reports that the Bears were going to try to work Roschon Johnson in more. And I remember doing my tournament strategy show on Saturdays and people asking Neil Orfield and myself, like, hey, should we be playing Roschon Johnson? It looks like he's going to be the guy. He ended up not being the guy in that slate. And now it seems like the field has mostly gotten off of him. But for a one-game slate, I think it makes sense to take a chance on the upside of Roschon Johnson, particularly in the passing game. As far as kickers, one thing that looks interesting here is Joey Sly. I'm getting to in 31% of lineups, but where is Santos? Here we go. So Cairo Santos only 5% of lineups. So if you guys are looking to roster a kicker to save salary today, Sly in our data looks like a much better kicking option than does Cairo Santos. As far as the captains we're getting the most of, a little bit more spread out here than we've seen on some other slates, but 22.7% of Brian Robinson in the captain spot, 22% of Sam Howell, and then 19% of Justin Fields in the captain spot. So those are the three captains getting to most predominantly, but not like one guy we're getting to near like 30, 40% of lineups or anything like that. And then some other options here. Curtis Samuel standing out as a cheaper contrarian option here. Only project for 5.6% captain exposure. It's getting a little bit overweight to the field on him. Who are we coming in underweight to here? Jahan Dotson is only in 14.7% of our lineup, so coming in underweight to the field on him on DK. Same with Cairo Santos, and then DJ Moore and Darnell Mooney. So it looks like how we're attacking the Bears is Justin Fields naked or Justin Fields like Roschon Johnson. And yeah, that would be super sick for some of these lineups I've built right here if somehow there was a screenplay to Roschon Johnson and he ended up running for a touchdown, because not getting to very much of the Bears receivers here, or really a ton of the Commanders receivers for that matter. Underweight to the field on Dotson. As far as McLaurin goes, we are getting slightly underweight to the field on him, more neutral than anything. But then we were overweight to the field on Curtis Samuel. So that is the one player here I'm getting overweight to the field to relative to the field's exposure. So that is a little walkthrough of everything we have that looks good for DraftKings. But now let's build out FanDuel lineups for tonight. Here we go. Chicago, Washington. Let's build 10,000 lineups. And while we're doing this, let's see what the payout is for the Thursday night contest on FanDuel. And for most of the year, they have been slightly flatter payout structures, but let's see if that is the same for today. So we have a $700,000 prize pool on FanDuel with $150,000 of it going to first place. So we're looking at a payout structure of, let's see, what is 100? So like, I guess we'll set it to 20% and we'll see what kind of results that ends up giving us here on the Sims. Let's see, what is the actual, we're going to have to do some math here. What is 150,000 out of 700,000? Yeah, 21.4%. So we've got options. We could either go 25% or 20%. Depends how contrarian we're looking to get. I'll actually go to 25. That'll eliminate some of the dupes we end up getting to. I know 20% is a little bit closer than the 25% mark, but still, I like to prioritize trying to be contrarian on these single game slates. So 25% payout to first is what I'm going to set it as for FanDuel tonight. And then we'll see what ends up looking different about the FanDuel lineups relative to DK, where DK, we're really heavy on the quarterbacks. We're underweight to some of the pass catchers. We're getting overweight to some of the contrarian running backs. And then also we're overweight to Brian Robinson in the captain spot. Let's see what kind of MVP exposure we get to him. And yeah, right away I noticed number one overall projected lineup here on FanDuel does have Brian Robinson in that MVP spot. And he was the player we're most overweight to as a captain on DraftKings. But Brian Robinson, Commanders defense, Logan Thomas, Terry McLaurin, and then Justin Fields. So a 4-1 onslaught stack here for the Commanders, but Justin Fields running it back on the other side. So we'll be looking for some rushing upside here for Justin Fields, which we always know he has in his back pocket. As far as duped lineups go, funny, we actually do have this one lineup that's duped a bunch, but projects so well for us that it lands in the top 150 anyway. Don't typically see that happen, but Sam Howell, Logan Thomas, Terry McLaurin, Khalil Herbert, Brian Robinson Jr., That is a lineup that makes it into the top 150 despite all of the dupes here, but none of the other dupe lineups making it into the top 150 sim ROI lineups. But Sam Howell, Curtis Samuel, Khalil Herbert, Jahan Dotson, Brian Robinson, and this one is Howell, Santos, McLaurin, Dotson, and Brian Robinson. So very similar looking lineups there, those two. And they're also projected for a lot of dupes, but ones that did not project quite as well from an ROI perspective. Player exposures here. And oh boy, we're getting to a ton of Commanders defense. So the Commanders are priced at, let's see, what's that defensive price on FanDuel? It is $9,500. So it is a fairly cheap defense to look at. And you're trying to consider, like, will the defense outscore the kickers? And at least in our projections, we have the Commanders defense at 9.2 fantasy points. We have Sly for 8.28, and then Santos a little bit lower off the top of my head. Yes, 6.83. So that's why in our projections where we're getting to Commanders defense more than guys like Sly and Santos, it's really just a projection thing where these guys are priced similarly, but we've got the Commanders for a considerably higher projection than Santos and then 1 fantasy point higher than Joey Sly. But yeah, lots of Commanders defense. So I'm going to be one of those donkeys playing defenses in showdown contests today, at least on the Commanders side. Other players we're getting to here, lots of Sam Howell, actually 35% of him in the MVP spot on FanDuel, and then another 35% in the flex spot. So overall, that makes for 70% exposure to Sam Howell and Justin Fields, 38% in the flex spot and 27% in the captain spot. So that gives us 65% of Justin Fields on the whole. Also getting overweight to Khalil Herbert. So on DraftKings, we're getting to more of Roschon Johnson. On FanDuel, getting to a little bit more of Khalil Herbert. But with that said, Roschon Johnson only projected for 10% ownership on FanDuel. So I'm also overweight to Roschon Johnson as a play here as well, where not too many crazy low-owned guys, but yeah, 10% of Roschon Johnson get to 25% of him. As far as other players in the flex spot, like Darnell Mooney's project for 9% ownership, but we are underweight to him. Yeah, not too many other contrarian flex plays that look all that good. So Roschon Johnson is one that stands out from that perspective. As far as the running backs go over on Washington, yeah, Brian Robinson, 33% in the flex spot. And in the captain, we have him in 12% of lineups. So overweight to the field overall on Brian Robinson. Slightly underweight to the field. Got myself a little backwards here. He's projected for 15% ownership in the MVP spot, cut to 12% of them. See a little bit underweight on Robinson. What about Antonio Gibson? Gibson hardly projected for any ownership. And also not projecting all that well for us in the captain spot, at least. But overweight to Gibson in the flex spot there. 15.8% ownership, got to 22.7%. So the second running backs actually look like decent contrarian flex plays for this slate. As far as who we are underweight to, not really fair to say Justin Fields or Sam Howell because we're overweight to them in the MVP spots. Other than that, though, some of the same guys that we were underweight to on DraftKings coming underweight to here on FanDuel as well. Jahan Dotson, underweight to the field on Cairo Santos, underweight on Cole Kmet, underweight on DJ Moore, underweight on Khalil Herbert. So, yeah, a lot of similarities between DraftKings and FanDuel. Although, where was Terry McLaurin? Oh, here we go. Yeah, about even with the field on McLaurin. No real difference here. 25.3% allowed compared to 26.6% ownership. Bears defense, a little bit overweight to them as well on FanDuel. So, yeah, going to be playing the defenses today. That is what our data is pointing towards. You guys want to save salary today? Go ahead and play the defenses on FanDuel. And then DraftKings, look at some of those cheaper flex options like a Roschon Johnson. So that's going to wrap it up for me. If you guys have not done yet, do me a big favor. Like, subscribe, follow, all that good stuff. I do appreciate it. And if you want to sign up for our football package, which includes all the data and information I went over while I was doing this video, sign up using the link below. Good luck today, guys, and I will be back here next week breaking down Monday Night Football in the same sort of format.